Hey everyone, let's learn about how to find some percents mentally. We're going to do some really easy work today. You are going to be able to use mental math strategies to find 50%, 25%, 10%, and 1% of any number. By the end of the day, you'll be able to do all of that. To get started, I want you in your notes to shade 50% of this circle. What would 50% of the circle look like? Well, you're going to cut it in half, right? And you're going to shade in just half of it. 1/2 of it, aren't you? Well, you know what 50% is, right? 50% is half. So anytime it asks for half of a number, half of a value, you know that you can just cut it in half and you'll get it. For example, if I want 50% of 30, well, then I can just cut 30 into two pieces. Well, let's get my face out of the way. And how do I cut 30 into two pieces? How do I cut it in half? Well, I divide it into two equal parts. So if I take 30, divide it into two pieces, I get 15. So if I want to know what 50% of 30 is, it's 15. What is 50% of 12? If I cut 12 in half, that gives me 6. 50% of 400 is 200. And 50% of 362, I might have to do a little math for that one. It is 181. Right here, I want you to choose your own number, maybe like your favorite number, or maybe an easy number like 100. What is half? What is 50% of 100? It is 50. And then down here, I want you to rewrite what is the rule? How do we find 50% of any number? Well, we just divide it by 2. That's the rule. Kind of cool, huh? The next thing I want us to talk about is how do you find 25% of any number? 25%. Well, if we cut it in half and then we cut it in half again, that gives us 1/4. And 1/4 is the same thing as 25%. So there is 1/4 or 25% of a circle. What's the trick there? What did I do? You cut it into half and half, right? Or you could say you cut it into 4. You divide it into 4. Whichever way works best for you. Some people like to think of 25% as dividing it into 4 pieces, so dividing it by 4. Other people like to visualize, well, first I cut it in half. So I do this, I find 50%, and then I find 50% of that, and I cut that in half. Whatever works for you works. So how do I find what 25% of 30 is? Well, I can either do the cut in half and cut in half. So I take 30, divide it by 2 and get 15, and then take 15, divide that by 2 again and get 7.5. That's strategy 1. Strategy 2 is just to divide it into 4 pieces to begin with. And that would give me oh, I know what I did wrong. I'm trying to find 25% of 30. There we go. That's why I was confused. Add a decimal and a 0, and I get 7.5. So either way you do it, you will find 25% of a number by cutting it into 4 equal pieces. So 12, what is 25% of 12? Or a lot of people say, what is a quarter of 12? 25% of 12 is 12 divided by 4, which is 3. What is 400 divided by 4? It is 100. Let me give you an example of what this would be. There are 400 students. 25% of them are 5th and 6th graders. How many are 5th and 6th graders? 100 of them are 5th and 6th graders. That's an example where you might see 25%. Let me give you another example. 362. If I want to find 25% of that, I'll divide it by 4. That will give me 90.5. All right, here's another example. I want to get a new VR set, but it's $362. I don't have that much money, but I have a coupon for 25% off. How much do I get to take off? That means I get to take off $90.50 off of the original price. Seems like a pretty good deal. So there's another example of why you need to find percents of a number. What is 25% of 100? 25. What's the rule? Divide by 4. That's your rule for 25%. How do I find 10% of a number? Let's say I wanted to find 10% of 300. Let's see if you can figure it out. 10% of 300 is 30. Do you see what the trick was? All you do with 10% is you take wherever the decimal is and you make it one place value smaller. You basically divide it, excuse me, you divide it by 10, which makes sense because this is 10% that I will divide by 10. So 10% of 30 is just 3. 10% of 12 is just 1.2. 10% of 400 is 40. 10% of 362 is 36.2. All I'm doing is wherever the decimal is, I make it one place value or 10 times smaller. So 10% of 100 is 10. The rule is divide by 10 or take the decimal and scoop it one place value smaller. You'll see 10% a lot if you know anything about the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. They require a 10% tithe. And a lot of members of this church will find 10% very easily because they just take the total amount they want to pay tithing on and they just take the decimal, boom, one decimal over, and that's how much that they know how to pay. And not just the Church of Jesus Christ. Lots of churches have a tithe. So if it's 10%, then it's easy for people to figure out what that percent is. What is 1%? Look at these examples here. 1% of 60 is just 0.6. 1% of 120 is 1.2. You got it figured out? 1% of 12 is 12 hundredths. 1% of 345 is 3.45. 1% of 4 is 4 hundredths. What is the rule with 1%? The rule with 1% is that you divide by 100 or you scoop it twice. So 1% of 30, my light is being weird, sorry. 1% of 30 is 0.3. 1% of 12 is 0 and 12 hundredths. 1% of 400 is 4. 1% of 362 is 3.62. So 1% of 100 is just 1. Kind of cool, huh? So let's do some other numbers. What is 50% of 80? Remember that 50% is just cutting it into half. So what is half of 80? Half of 80 is, I'm getting there. Half of 80 is 40. So if you want some new shoes, but they're $80, but they're 50% off, that means you get to take $40 off. Screaming deal, huh? What's 25% of 120? Remember, 25% is where we divide by 4. So let's take 120 and divide it by 4, and we'll get 30. 30 is 25% of 120. What is 10% of 824? These are my favorite because all you have to do is, if the decimal's not in sight, then you put it on the right and you scoop it one place value in. So it's 82.4. And then what is 1% of 14? If the decimal's not in sight, then you put it on the right, and this time you scoop it twice. So 1% of 14 is 14 hundredths. Let's think about it this way. You have $14. Okay, and you want to take 1% of that and put it towards a gift to your least favorite sister. Your mom says you have to get a gift. And so you're like, fine, I'll take 1% of the money that I have and give them a gift. Well, what's 1% of 14? It ends up being a whopping 14 cents. Good luck finding a gift for 14 cents. But that's how small 1% is. You go from dollars all the way down to just pennies. 1% is very small, right? If you have a whole pie, 1% is one tiny little sliver of that. That's why when you find 1% of something, it ends up being a very small number. All right. Let me give you one challenge to see if you can figure out what you would do. What? Just kidding. I won't give you a challenge. Oh, here we go. What is 75% of 24? I haven't taught you a rule for 75%. What if, hear me out, what if you take 50% of 224? I know that's not 75%, but then what if I add to it another 25% of 24? That should give me 75%. Should we see if it works? 50% of 24 is 12. 25% of 24, remember I'm going to divide by 4, so 24 divided by 4 is 6. So it's 6. So if I add those two up, I get 18. 75% of 24 is 18, and that is correct. Kind of cool, huh? How you can use those 50, 25, 10, and 1 to maybe find some other things. Like maybe you could find 21% of 84 by finding 10% of 84, which is 8.4, and doing another 10% of 84, which is 8.4. That'd give you 20%, correct? And then could I get another 1% of 84 by scooping it twice and going 0.84? Yeah, you totally could. Your answer would be 17 and 64 hundredths. So 17 and 24 hundredths is 21% of 84. Cool, huh? Here's what I'd like you to do. I'd like you to pause the video and then go over these, see if you can figure them out, and then restart it back up. Okay? Pause. Go. All right, 50%. I know for all of these, I'm going to divide by 2. So 84 divided by 2 is 42, 5, 300, and 111. Is that what you got? Now for these, I'm going to divide by 4. I'm going to put them in, cut them into half, or cut them into half again. However you'd like. Since you've already got half, you could take these and divide them by 2 again and get 21. Or you can just take this and in your white space, divide it by 4 and get 150. Okay, which you notice is also half of 300. Either way you do it, as long as you are finding 20%, it's fine. Ooh, what is half of 111? I don't know. Let's figure it out. That's going to be 5. 22 will be 5. Oh, interesting. 55.5. Cool. And then 10% and 1%, super fun. We just get to scoop the decimal. So 8.4, 1, 60, 22.2. All I did was move the decimal once. Now for 1%, I'm going to scoop it a second time. And I'm going to 0.84, 0.1, 6, and 2.2. There we go. This is kind of a challenge. Feel free to try it out, but you don't have to.